Hello, YouTube. My name is David. I'm a scientist, a photographer, and possibly the only man irresponsible enough to bring a camera into the Cretaceous period. My mission? To travel across the world through every era and photograph the same places as time transforms them. Paris, 2026. Of all the coordinates I could have punched into the time circuits, this one is magnificent. Rue Soufflot. A straight line, a perfect axis, climbing toward the Panthéon. Look at it. Buses, bicycles, traffic lights, limestone facades, pedestrians, cafes, stone, history, modern life, all layered on top of each other like geological strata with better pastries. And there it is, the Panthéon, a monument to memory, a temple of the nation, a machine for turning people into history. But what fascinates me is not only the monument, it's the location. This street, this slope, this hill, the Montagne Sainte-Geneviève. A city is not just buildings, it is habits repeated in the same place. Paths become roads, roads become boulevards, sacred hills become monuments, mud becomes stone, stone becomes memory. So I took my first photograph. Paris, 2026. Rue Soufflot, the Panthéon, the baseline. And then I thought, if this street is a sentence, what were the earlier words? So naturally, I did the only responsible thing a scientist with a time machine could do. I went backward. The first stop, 1944. The air changed immediately, heavier, nervous. Paris was still Paris, but wounded, tense, holding its breath. Rue Soufflot still led toward the Panthéon, but the city felt older, darker, more fragile. There were signs of occupation, resistance, exhaustion. People moved carefully. Some carried fear, others carried hope. And then, flags. Tricolor flags appearing again. Cautiously at first, then proudly. Civilians, resistance fighters, soldiers. The sound of liberation approaching. The Panthéon stood there like a witness. It had seen republics rise and fall, empires come and go, and now it was watching Paris reclaim itself. I took the photograph because 1944 is not ancient history. It is close enough to touch. It reminds us that the city we call timeless was almost lost to violence, ideology, and fear. And I felt something I did not expect. Relief. Not scientific relief, human relief. Next, 1900. The Belle Époque. Now Rue Soufflot felt elegant, confident, almost theatrical. Horse-drawn carriages, long dresses, hats, polished shoes, students, bourgeois families, workers, street vendors, a city moving with rhythm. No modern traffic, no buses, no painted road lanes. The street was already formal, already proud, but softer. The Panthéon stood clean and monumental, not as a tourist backdrop, but as part of the living city. Around 1900, Paris was at the height of its image as a capital of art, science, engineering, and modern urban life. Electricity was spreading. Photography, cinema, aviation, medicine, everything seemed possible. But the photograph also caught something else. Confidence. The kind of confidence cities have before the century teaches them humility. Then I jumped around 1860. Now the street was becoming modern. This was the era of Baron Haussmann's transformation of Paris under Napoleon III. Medieval streets were being cut open. Old neighborhoods were being demolished. New boulevards were drawn like surgical incisions through the city. Rue Soufflot was broader, cleaner, more formal. The facades were becoming regular. The old city was being disciplined into symmetry. And there, at the end of the axis, the Panthéon dominated the scene. I took the photograph because this is where the Paris most people imagine was being manufactured. Stone facades, straight perspectives, monumental views, urban order. But I felt uneasy. Progress is never neutral. One person sees light, air, hygiene, circulation. Another sees displacement, demolition, control. The city was becoming beautiful. But beauty, in history, often has a bill. Then, 1789. The street narrowed. The buildings leaned closer. The ground was uneven, dirty, alive. No houseman symmetry yet. This was pre-modern Paris. Crowded, irregular, noisy, tense. And at the top of the hill stood the newly built church of Sainte-Geneviève, the future Panthéon. Fresh, neoclassical, pale stone, columns, dome. It looked almost too rational for the world around it. The French Revolution. People gathered in clusters. Pamphlets passed from hand to hand. National Guard uniforms. Cockades. Street vendors. Students. Clerics. Workers. Bourgeois citizens whispering, arguing, hoping, fearing. The building itself was about to change meaning. First church, then revolutionary monument, then symbol of the nation. A structure can be built for God, and later, claimed by the Republic. That's the extraordinary thing about monuments. Humans keep rewriting them. I took the photograph, just as a group of men began arguing about liberty. I did not interrupt. A scientist must observe. Well, usually. Next stop, 1500. No Pantheon, no neoclassical dome, no grand boulevard. Instead, the hill was dominated by the Abbey of Sainte-Geneviève and the growing religious and scholastic quarter around it. The street was busier than the earlier Middle Ages. Merchants, carts, clerics, students, artisans. Saint-Étienne-de-Mont was beginning to emerge nearby. Not yet the later completed church, but already part of the religious landscape. The whole district smelled of mud, animals, smoke, bread, parchment, and humanity. And the students, young men in robes carrying manuscripts, arguing with the confidence of people who have read 3 books and think they understand the universe. In 1500, Paris was already an intellectual powerhouse. The University of Paris had made this area one of the great centers of medieval learning. I took the photograph because here, the street was not yet modern, but the mind of Paris was already forming. Stone, prayer, argument, commerce, scholarship. A city thinking itself into the future. Then I went to the year 1000. The change was dramatic. The area was quieter, looser, less dense. The road was not a street yet, more a worn uphill track. Timber buildings, rough stone, gardens, animals, fenced plots. At the top of the hill, the early abbey of Sainte-Geneviève stood as the anchor of the landscape. Smaller, heavier, more Romanesque in feeling. A religious center, not a national monument. Paris was not yet the great capital it would become. It was growing, but still fragile. The Capetian dynasty had only recently begun. Power was local, religious, defensive. This photograph felt like a seed. The future city was there, but only as a possibility. A path, a hill, an abbey, a few people moving uphill with goods and prayers. Sometimes history does not begin with thunder. Sometimes it begins with footsteps in mud. Then, 500 AD, a world between worlds. Roman Lutetia had faded. Frankish Paris was emerging. The urban fabric was broken, thinner, more scattered. There were traces of Roman stone, reused blocks, fragments of walls, old foundations. At the hilltop, not an abbey yet in the later medieval sense, but an early Christian sacred presence, a chapel, shrine, or small religious complex connected to the age of Sainte Geneviève. This is where the story becomes especially powerful. Sainte Geneviève, the patron saint of Paris, belongs to this transitional world. Late Roman, early Christian, early Frankish. The people looked different from the Romanized citizens of earlier centuries. Simpler clothing, rougher buildings, fewer signs of imperial order. I took the photograph because 500 AD is not simply after Rome. It is the transformation of Rome into something else. Paris was no longer Lutetia, but it was not yet medieval Paris either. It was becoming. Then I aimed the machine at 50 AD, Roman Lutetia. The hill was part of a Romanized landscape, more structured than the early medieval world. Roads, masonry, tiled roofs, workshops, carts, amphorae, stone, timber, plaster. At the top of the hill, a Roman civic or religious complex, a forum-like presence, columns, porticos, formal architecture. Nothing like the Panthéon yet, but the idea of monumental centrality was already there. This was northern Gaul under Roman influence. Not Rome itself, not marble everywhere, and emperors striking poses every 15 seconds. A provincial city, developing, adapting, mixing Gallic and Roman traditions. People wore tunics and cloaks. Merchants moved goods. Officials walked with purpose. Local Gauls lived inside a Roman system that was reshaping everything. I took the photograph because here the hill became urban in a new way. The future Paris axis was still invisible, but the habit of building significance on this place had begun. Then I jumped to 250 BC. No Rome, no churches, no abbey, no Pantheon, the Parisii. The landscape was semi-rural, Iron Age, lightly settled. A worn path, fenced plots, timber and daub structures, animals, carts, smoke from hearths, people in wool cloaks, and simple patterned garments. At the hilltop, perhaps a modest sacred enclosure or communal high place. Nothing grand, nothing stone and imperial, just a place that mattered. The Parisii were a Gallic people living around the Seine Basin before Roman conquest. Their name survives in Paris itself. This photograph felt humbling, because before Paris was a city, it was a people. Before monuments, there were fields, paths, rituals, trade, memory, and the river. The city did not begin as stone, it began as belonging. Then I did what any cautious scientist would absolutely not do. I went deeper. 4,500 BC, the Neolithic Paris Basin. No city, no tribe called the Parisii, no metal, no writing. But humans were here, farming, building, tending animals, shaping pottery, clearing land. The landscape was still dominated by nature, but now humans had begun to leave a more permanent mark. Timber houses, fenced plots, cultivated patches, storage areas, animals, baskets, stone tools. This was the agricultural revolution in slow motion. The shift from hunting and gathering to settled farming changed everything. Diet, population, disease, property, inheritance, conflict, society. I took the photograph because this is one of the great turning points of human existence. No boulevard yet, but the human habit of transforming land had begun. Next, 7,000 BC. The world became quieter. Forest, glades, damp ground, a faint footpath, temporary shelters, a small hearth. Mesolithic hunter-gatherers moved through the landscape rather than owning it in the later agricultural sense. They knew the land intimately. Fish, animals, plants, seasons, stone tools, wood, bone, baskets, dogs perhaps. The future Rue Soufflot was not a road. It was a passage through a living environment. I took the photograph and felt something strange. These people had no city, but they were not primitive in the foolish way modern people use that word. They understood survival, ecology, movement, materials, weather. They did not dominate the landscape. They read it. Then, 15,000 BC, cold, open, harsh. The Paris Basin was not buried under a giant glacier, but it was a late Ice Age environment, periglacial, windswept, sparse, steppe-like. Low vegetation, exposed soil, cold air, distant animals. Small groups of Upper Paleolithic humans moved through the landscape. Hide clothing, flint tools, spears, fire, seasonal camps. This was the world after the Great Cold Maximum, but before the forest returned. I took the photograph because it felt like humanity reduced to essentials. Warmth, food, shelter, cooperation, knowledge. No city, no monument, no nation. Just survival under a vast sky. Then I went to 40,000 BC, early modern humans in Europe. The landscape was cool, open, partly wooded, Small mobile groups moved through the region. Flint blades, hides, wooden tools, early symbolic thought, perhaps stories carried from camp to camp. This was not yet the world of agriculture, but it was our world in another form. Anatomically modern humans, people like us, living in conditions almost impossible for us to imagine. I took the photograph because, for the first time that far back, I felt a direct mirror. Different clothes, different technology, different world, but the same species. The same curiosity, the same fear of darkness, the same need to explain the sky. Then, 80,000 BC, Neanderthals, a cooler Pleistocene landscape, open woodland, grass, scattered trees, damp ground, a small group moving carefully, perhaps pausing at the slope. No bows, no pottery, no farming. Stone flakes, scrapers, wooden spears, hides, fire. And not brutes, not caricatures. Neanderthals were intelligent humans adapted to Ice Age Europe. They made tools, used fire, cared for each other, understood their world. The photograph was almost empty. That was the point. Human presence was tiny. Nature dominated everything. I felt small, which, scientifically speaking, is often the correct emotional response. Then, 300,000 BC, deeper still, the human presence became more ambiguous. Early Neanderthals or related archaic humans, simple tools, perhaps fire, wooden spears, temporary occupation. The landscape was temperate, wild, ecologically rich. The future Paris was only a slope, a rise, a place animals crossed, and early humans may have used briefly. I took the photograph because this is where history becomes archaeology, and archaeology becomes geology. The evidence thins, certainty vanishes. We move from names and dates into traces, stone, bone, sediment, pollen, climate. The farther back you go, the quieter the universe becomes. Then, I punched in 1 million years ago. Now there was no Paris, no France, no Europe as a cultural concept. Just land, climate, animals, water, vegetation, time. Human presence in this region at that depth is uncertain, so I looked for none. No camp, no tools, no fire. Maybe animals crossed the slope. Maybe water carved faint lines. Maybe nothing remembered anything. The future Panthéon hill was only a natural rise. I took the photograph because sometimes absence is the lesson. Civilization is recent. The land is not. Then, 5 million years ago, no humans, no hominins in this place. A warmer, greener world. Open woodland, wetlands, ancient mammals, birds, shallow water, thick vegetation. This was the Paris Basin long before it had any idea it would become Paris. I took the photograph and laughed. Not because it was funny, because the human mind is ridiculous. We look at a city and think it is permanent, but the land beneath it has worn 1,000 faces. Paris, before Paris, was not waiting for us. It was simply alive. Then I went too far. 66 million years ago. The end of the Cretaceous. The Paris Basin was connected to shallow seas, chalky sediments, coastal wetlands, lagoonal margins. Not a dinosaur theme park. Not giant monsters stomping down imaginary boulevards. A warm, humid, marine-influenced world. Reeds, ferns, conifers, early flowering plants, shallow water, distant reptiles, birds, maybe pterosaurs far above. The hill was not a hill of memory. It was a natural rise in the world before mammals inherited the earth. I took the photograph and felt a chill, because 66 million years ago is not only the dinosaur era, it is the edge of catastrophe. Soon, an asteroid would rewrite the planet, and millions of years later, somehow, a primate would stand on this same line of sight and build a monument. Science is terrifying and magnificent. I returned to 2026. Same street, same Pantheon. Buses, cyclists, people on phones, completely unaware that beneath their shoes were 66 million years of transformation. But I was not finished. I'd gone backward to see how Paris became Paris. Now I had to know what Paris might become. So I turned to the time circuits forward. 2100! The city had changed, but it had not fallen. Rue Soufflot had become greener, cooler, more pedestrian, more resilient. Fewer cars, more shade trees, permeable paving, bioswales, rain gardens, lighter surfaces, water management built into the street. The Panthéon still stood, preserved, dignified, surrounded by a Paris adapting to heat, storms, and climate pressure. This was not a utopia. It was work. Adaptation is not glamorous. It is drainage, shade, planning, maintenance, restraint. I took the photograph because this future felt possible. Not guaranteed. Possible. And that may be the most dangerous kind of future because it depends on choices. Then, 2200. Cleaner, quieter, more controlled. Autonomous shuttles, delivery robots, maintenance systems, adaptive shade, sensors, mature trees, carefully managed water systems. The city was still Paris, but automation had seeped into everything. The Panthéon remained. The facades remained. But technology had become almost invisible, like plumbing or electricity in earlier centuries. People were fewer. The street was calm, efficient, slightly strange. I took the photograph because this was not the future of flying cars and neon chaos. It was the future of quiet systems. And quiet systems can be more powerful than spectacular machines. Then, 3200. No people. The street was broken, overgrown, but not fully erased. Old autonomous pods sat silent. Dead sensors, rusted maintenance machines, some tiny lights still flickered uselessly. The Panthéon stood weathered, cracked, overtaken by vines. The city had become a hybrid. Stone, roots, obsolete technology, silence. I took the photograph and felt something close to grief. Not because humans were gone from the frame, but because our systems remained without us, still faintly trying to perform tasks whose meaning had vanished. A machine watering plants in an empty city is funny, until it is heartbreaking. Then, year 5000. Nature had largely won. Trees grew through the old boulevard. Roots lifted the stone. Former rain gardens had become wetlands. Buildings were broken, but still partly legible. The Panthéon remained as a ruined monument, its silhouette still recognizable through vines and growth. Technology was nearly gone. Dead, buried, corroded. The old street was now a green corridor. I took the photograph because it showed the patience of nature. Humans build quickly. Nature edits slowly. But nature is a relentless editor. Then, 10,000 AD. Paris was no longer a city. It was an archaeological landscape. The Haussmannian buildings were fragments, foundations, partial walls, buried stones. The Panthéon was reduced to a monumental skeleton, still identifiable, but barely. The old Rue Soufflot axis survived only as a ghost in the terrain. No active technology, no people, no maintained path, just ruins, soil, trees, moss, stone, and time. I took the photograph and realized archaeology is not about the past, it is about the future. Everything we build is a future ruin. Even Paris. Especially Paris. Then I went farther. Too far to name cleanly. The city was gone. No Panthéon, no facades, no road, no visible archaeology. Only a natural rise, a meadow-like corridor, trees, grasses, wet ground, stones, light. The viewpoint was the same. That was the only clue. The camera still looked toward the former hill. But Paris itself had disappeared back into landscape. I took the final photograph in silence. No exclamation, no calculation, no joke. Because there are moments when even a scientist must stop explaining. I returned to 2026 with the photographs. And there it was again. Rue Soufflot. The Panthéon. Buses. Cyclists. Pedestrians. Stone facades. Clouds above Paris. But I could no longer see only the present. I saw the Parisii path. The Roman hill. The Abbey. The Revolution. The Belle Époque. The occupation. the climate future, the abandoned machines, the forest, the ruins, the empty meadow, all in one place. That is what time travel teaches you. Not that the past is gone, not that the future is fixed, but that every place is deeper than it looks. A street is not just a street, it is a stack of vanished worlds. And the Panthéon? The Panthéon is not only a monument to great people, it is a reminder that memory itself is temporary. So take the photograph, preserve the moment, because time is already moving. And believe me, it does not need a machine.